This is Sarah, and I just want to take a moment to speak to you about this week's sponsor, Favor. Favor, Inc. is a statewide family-led nonprofit 501c3 organization that is committed to empowering families as advocates and partners in improving educational and health outcomes for our children. Favor is the Connecticut state organization of the Federation of Families for Children's Mental Health. Favor offers a single place for families with children who have medical, mental, emotional, and behavioral health challenges to find information, assistance, and training. To find out more about Favor, please go to favor-ct.org. We are grateful for our opportunity to work with Favor as a sponsor, and now on to the rest of the episode. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Caregiver Chronicles 100th episode! Woohoo! I think you're gonna have to turn the volume down on that woohoo. It was a little bit loud. Woohoo! Oh my god, I feel bad for anybody listening with headphones right now. My name is Sarah. I am your host, and I am here with my husband, Jeremy.
Hello! She's been on more episodes than me.
Yes, I have. So this is our 100th episode of Caregiver Chronicles that we are recording right now. This makes we're just shy of 2 years, right?
Yeah, was it like 2 weeks from now will be 2 years.
Yeah, so pretty much we're celebrating our 2-year anniversary of Caregiver Chronicles and our 100th episode together because, you know, why make them separate?
No, yeah, we're going to have fun.
Anyway, what we were thinking about doing for the show is going to be a little bit different than our normal, like, family updates or interview styles. We reached out to some of our favorite guests and our sponsor.
And our listeners.
And our listeners and friends and asked if they had any questions that they wanted us to share or they wanted us to answer. And we're going to answer them live, and we are going to answer them honestly. Yes, we do know the questions ahead of time. Our answers are going to be very candid and very, some of the questions we just got today. And our answers are going to be very candid and very real and very raw because that is one of the things that I pride myself on as the host of Caregiver Chronicles is trying to be as raw as possible about caregiving and, you know, our caregiving journey, right?
Absolutely.
I guess, do we start with questions? We also have, like, comments and stuff like that from guests and, you know, past guests and friends of the show, listeners. So
yeah, questions and comments.
Yeah, so we'll kind of have a little bit of both in there. We're really excited about, I don't know. I just want to say this. I cannot believe that we've made it 2 years and 100 episodes of Caregiver Chronicles. Our first episode was recorded in our truck, and I had no idea what I was doing. Our first interview, I was so nervous. I thought I was going to vomit.
Yeah, I think you were sitting in our closet to do the interview.
I was, and, like...
While we were using our phones, because that was all we had.
Yeah, and it's just, like, we've come such a long way, and we have had so much support, and we've achieved so many goals with this podcast that I didn't even think I would ever achieve. We have our first sponsor. We're on a network. We've been on lists, like, mentioned as a podcast for family caregivers. And we've gotten mentions, and we have connected with some, like, incredible, just absolutely incredible people over the years. And we've gotten to share journeys and stories, and we've had people reach out to us and say that I've been an inspiration or I've helped them get through a hard time. When I think about it, I can't believe that I kind of did these things and some of the things that I've done. So it's just amazing. And I think I might, like, throw in a question here and there for Jeremy. And I think, Jeremy, you should feel free to throw in a question for me too.
Okay.
If one comes up regarding the podcast.
Well, let's get into the question, shall we?
Okay.
All right. First one is from Michelle, who says, how much time does it take to get episodes up and published from start to finish? A long time.
I don't think it takes that long. It does take a while. So Jeremy and I have very different roles.
Yes. It depends from start to finish. Depends if starting means if we have a guest reaching out to them or them reaching out to us, because sometimes those are booked months in advance.
Yes.
And then, when the recording happens, it depends on the length of time the person talks, because some people, are nervous and don't talk very long. Others are, just they talk all the time. Can fill up a full episode,
A full hour
or
yeah,
more for the episode. Yeah, and plus you all have to, you don't want to be rude and just, we're going to start this and then we're going to end this. You want to actually have a conversation beforehand and afterwards, to help she's laughing because I complain about that in the edit, but I also recognize that it's actually an important part of the process, because you want the people to feel, the people you're interviewing to feel comfortable while they're being interviewed. You don't want them to be, stiff. You want them to be, dynamic as they can be. So, I mean, that's the thing. So a lot of the raw recordings she hands me are an hour and a half to 2 hours long.
A lot of times, so in, like he said, like booking guests and planning content, there are times where I will spend, an hour just scrolling through social media feeds and researching people and going on different websites where they help you find guests for a podcast, or even just answering emails and trying to find scheduling time. And that planning can take, like Jeremy said, that can take weeks and months. There are guests that we had scheduled 2 months, 3 months before the show even aired, before we were even ready to edit the show, or they were scheduled 2-3 months before we recorded, and then, it was another 2 months before we edited, and I almost kind of, like, forgot. Not so much as I forgot about them or the interview, but, like, there were aspects of it, like, when I'm listening, when Jeremy's editing, re-listening and stuff, I'm like, oh my god, that's right, they said blank. Like Jeremy was saying, too, the other thing, me talking to guests before interviews and after interviews, I love that. I love connecting with my guests and my audience and connecting with people. That's just, if I didn't, I wouldn't be doing this, like this is, and I was a caregiver professionally, and my job when I was a nurse's aide was to connect with the people I was taking care of. Like, you have to build a relationship with people, and I just love, I don't even think I've had a guest I didn't like yet. I think I've really liked everyone, and I just, like you said, there's the after, like the beginning and the after conversation, and sometimes there's stuff you learn in those conversations about people or about your journey, and it's so validating and so, I don't know, I really love it. But how long it takes episodes to get published start to finish, I would say hours.
Oh yeah, just when I start editing, because you got to remove certain things, the ands, the ums, the that, or if they mess up and they start over, you got to keep an eye on the editing. The good rule of thumb is to whatever length of time that is, double it. So if she hands me a 90-minute episode, I'm going to be editing for 3 hours.
Yeah. I would say on his part probably a couple hours of editing. On my part, at least an hour for recording, and then you take the time for booking and everything like that. So yeah, I would say probably, like, we definitely invest we'll say we invest 10 hours a week in this podcast.
At the very least.
At the very least, yeah.
All right. And then question number 2, also from Michelle. Having 2 kids with extensive needs, how do you find time to do Caregiver Chronicles?
It's my third baby. It's my passion. It's one of the things that I get so excited about doing this podcast. It's one of the things that I look forward to. I think Jeremy will tell you, I think every single guest, I get so excited. Oh my gosh, this person wants to be on my show. I'm so excited. And oh, I have an interview with this person today. And oh, this interview was so great. And I'm just always, I don't know. I'm passionate about my family too, don't get me wrong. But this is like, I just make the time because I love it.
Yeah, and then how we do it for interviews, like you said, she normally schedules them when the kids are in school so that she is free. A lot of my editing is done either at night after specifically Joey goes to bed, or it's done in the mornings on a weekend where she can watch the boys while I take the time to go edit the shows. That's kind of how we're able to make it work, is we work around the times where the kids are not requiring our attention.
Yeah, and the other thing, the cool thing about having, like, our own show is our flexibility. Like, we have we have flexibility to schedule things when we can and when we want to. Like, I took most of the summer off for recording. We're really only recording family updates and this until September when the kids are back in school. Then I'm going to start recording guests again. I don't know. And I think the family updates and things like that are easier for you to edit too because you're on it. So it's like less work over the summer and then more work in the spring and fall.
Yeah. I would say
time.
so.
But it's flexible time. We can kind of do it when we want at our time and at the time that works for guests. And that's how I think we find the time, is that we squeeze it in when we can.
All right, next up from Nancy Hauser Bloom, someone who appeared on one of our episodes.
Oh, and I love her.
Says, you created such a comfortable dialogue setting for guests. Did you ever see yourself a successful podcast host a couple of years back? I didn't. I don't know if she did or not. Although I did recommend her to start the podcast because I knew that she could get her point across very well through the audio format.
Well, first I want to say thank you, Nancy, because that is just so sweet to say that. And I try to have comfortable dialogue for guests, and like I said before, I love my guests. I love everybody. I have a big heart, and I just love and get along with almost everybody. I still don't see myself as a successful podcast host. Cringe. I know that's a terrible thing to say on air on your own show, isn't it?
Not really. I mean, it's not like we have Joe Rogan where, millions of people listen to us every week. But, we are helping people, and I guess in that sense, that is a success.
That was our goal. Our goal was to just at least help one person, or at the very least an outlet for me. And we've achieved way more than that. So, like I was saying in the beginning, I guess we have been more successful than sometimes I give myself credit for. I'm still learning how to interview people. Because I have no training in this. I didn't really know where I saw myself with this. I just knew that I was enjoying it and having fun with it. And, after I left my job, I was able to take it up a notch, which I'm grateful for that. So I'm going to say no, I never saw myself as a successful podcast host. I still don't think I do. But yeah. And then Nancy asks a second question.
Was there an experience that led you to believe you could do such a thing?
That led me to believe I could do this. I think I wanted to write a blog initially. This was supposed to be a blog, and Jeremy told me to do a podcast instead. Not that I always do what he tells me. I almost never do what he tells me, but this time he was right.
Specifically, she said she told me about the idea for a blog because she was experiencing burnout at work. And she's like, I can't be the only one experiencing this. I want to help.
And at home, yeah.
And at home. And she wants to help those that are experiencing it. So she mentioned the blog and told me that she would need me to edit it because I'm a little better at those sort of things, working in journalism. And I can read her grocery lists, and I don't have the time to edit that much. So I told her, you're a terrible writer, but you're an excellent storyteller. So why not a podcast? Because I had been listening to podcasts, and I knew there was plenty of stuff you could use to start one that would distribute it for you on major platforms. I didn't know if anybody would listen to us outside of our family at the time, but,
Turns out more people outside of our family listen than our own families, but that's okay. And that's fine too. I think it was really Jeremy telling me, like, hey, you can do this, and just doing it that made me believe I could do it. I still have my moments where I feel like, oh my God, what am I thinking doing this? Like, who the heck am I? But I think we all do that sometimes. But yeah, no, I don't know, I just do. And then the next question.
Yes, Nancy also asked us, what was the inspiration for Caregiver Chronicles, which we kind of answered. It was burnout.
Yeah, I was so burnt out. Actually, oh God, I'm going to get really raw. I actually wanted to die. And I did. I stood in the living room and I was like, I just want to die. I want to die. And I called a crisis line. And I sat outside on the back porch and I was like hyperventilating, crying, and I couldn't even talk. So I texted a crisis line because I couldn't take it anymore. I was that burnt out. I told, once I got through the feeling of just, I can't go on once I got through that feeling, and the text crisis line helped. And I have mentioned them before in this podcast and in other podcasts. I talked to Jeremy, I talked to my counselor, and then it was kind of like when I started to, in my support group leader, my parents, my friends, I reached out to a lot of people and said, this is how I felt the other day, and I couldn't call anybody because I couldn't even talk, and but I managed to start to pull myself together and realize I am not the only healthcare worker going through what I'm going through right now. Mind you, this was, summer of 2020, so this was the pandemic. Things were really hard. Or actually, I think it was just before school now. I think it was like May of 2020. And I was, things were really hard, and it took a couple months, and then I was like, you know what, I really want to share my story. I really need to get it out. I need to get it off my chest. I need to get it out there, and I know I'm not the only mom with kiddos on the spectrum in the world. I know I'm not the only person watching their grandmother decline from Alzheimer's, and I know I'm not the only person working in a healthcare facility with residents on lockdown who are declining, and my mental health was just tanking because I was watching everybody go backwards. I don't know. It was that moment, and that, I had to get through it, and I had to get through it to share it. And I think that was my reason.
All right. Next is a comment from Tim and Tanis from Echo Box, one of our favorite guests, two of our favorite guests, one of our favorite episodes. Said, keep up the great work, guys. Thank you so much. We loved that interview. Echo Box is a wonderful tool, and it came at a very important time for specifically Sarah.
It really is. The day that we recorded that episode, that was the same day my grandmother passed away. And it was just so ironic that we recorded about a program keeping, to help preserve a loved one's memory, and I lost my grandmother that same day. I was afraid I was going to have to cancel that recording, but Tim and Tanis, they're just always been so kind. I hope to hear from them again in the future. I would love to have them back. So, if you guys are listening, you guys are always welcome to come back on Caregiver Chronicles. Just reach out, and we'd love to have you. And that's my comment back to them.
All right. Next up is someone, if you've listened to other podcasts we've hosted, or even listened to this one who's been on a few times, Dave Carter, a good friend of ours, the scout leader for Remy's scout troop when he was, scout pack, Cub Scout pack when he was in it, asked, who's your favorite guest/guest host? I think he's just looking for a little praise right there because he's the only guest host we've had on this one. We're in our 1 year anniversary. He actually came on and interviewed us, which was pretty cool. And that was the only one that didn't, where someone else technically hosted.
Yeah.
The rest of the time, it's been one or two of us. And as for our favorite guest,
I'll let you pick yours, and then I have to pick mine.
There have been some great ones, but I think I kind of go back to our first one when we interviewed the Spectrum Dad, just seeing someone going through something similar, and he also had a podcast, and we collaborated together. We appeared on his, and he appeared on ours, and it was so great just to, at times being an autism parent can feel very, very lonely. Even though you know the numbers, you don't necessarily know someone else going through it. So having just being able for, we talked to him for about 2 hours between the two podcasts, someone else who goes through similar things, if you met one kid with autism, you met one kid with autism, his son's needs are different than our son's needs, but, he at least had a frame of reference, and so it was really cool having that collaboration.
Yeah, I liked Fred a lot, the Spectrum Dad, Fred Marvel. He was a great guest. As far as guest host, Dave, you were the only one, but yes, Dave, you were my favorite guest host, and you always will be, unless, Oprah guest hosts, then sorry. But as far as my favorite guest, I have to. Listen, all right. I have to. It's my mom. Having her share she didn't even really want to. I kind of had to nudge her a little bit to do it. But when she sat down and shared her story of her taking care of my grandmother and what that was like, and it was just so personal and raw, I think after she did it, she looked at me and she was like, I just feel better saying everything. And I was like, yeah. It's how I feel every week after I record. And I also had, a coworker, Jen, on here who I loved Jen. She was one of my first interviews. My best friend, Tracy. Renee Schreier, I loved her. I loved Patricia Shevland. There hasn't been a guest on here that I didn't like. I really love every guest. But
that's
my
because
mom...
we're able to weed out the ones that we don't like before we actually interview them.
Yeah. But my mom is my number one. Like, hands down, mom wins.
How has the focus of your caregiving changed over 100 episodes?
Well, I'm no longer a professional caregiver. I'm only a personal, family caregiver. I'm just a mom now. I don't have a grandmother either that I'm looking after, unfortunately.
It takes a lot of the pressure off of you in that sense that you're not helping your mother take care of your grandmother. May she rest in peace. And you're not professionally going in and taking care of her, especially during the pandemic and the crazy thing. Because if you've followed us from the beginning, I think only after about 3 or 4 episodes that we had to put out a bonus episode where I'm like, Sarah has COVID. We're not going to be recording for a little bit because she can't talk.
Yeah,
she can't breathe. But as for my caregiving, Sarah's more the caregiver because she did it in both professional and personal settings. I've only done it in a personal setting, but how has the focus of my caregiving changed? Just, I am more aware of things from the interviews just that I've edited from, be it autism or Alzheimer's or any other form of dementia. Or we just did last week was about Huntington's disease, and I'm just more aware of other people. So maybe not in a direct caregiving sense, but in an indirect caregiving sense, I'm just more aware and paying closer attention to things.
Yeah, and I would agree with that with you, Jeremy, or for you. I've noticed a big shift in Jeremy really also becoming an advocate in a sense, not just for his children, but for all people with all kinds of medical needs and just wanting what's best for the world. And I'm super proud of him for that. And, like I said, my role has shifted in that my role had to shift my focus. I became, a stay-at-home special needs mom. My role needed to. I think that role was going to change regardless of whether or not Caregiver Chronicles existed or not. We knew that was coming a matter of time. And I think that just in that sense it has. But, I've learned so much about family caregivers and the struggles we all go through. So much more in just that feeling of validation that I'm not alone in this. That feeling of I'm not as isolated as I feel sometimes is so important. And, I've also had my moments where I've been able to step up and help and offer guidance or advice to someone else going through any type of family caregiver situation. So I'm grateful for those. And that's a big thing that shifted.
All right, next question. What is the biggest lesson you've learned since starting Caregiver Chronicles?
Jeremy, you answer first.
The biggest lesson that I've learned is that there are a lot more people who need help and maybe don't know where to find it than you realize. We all need help in some ways, but the responses we got from when we did Instagram Lives while our computer was broken, to comments on our social media, to sometimes very large numbers for an episode out of nowhere, just people listening and wanting to know more, and just realize that, you can know. It's one thing to kind of believe that everyone needs help. It's another thing to see it from people saying how you have helped them.
Yeah, I think that's one lesson. I think one of the lessons that I've learned is to not be afraid to reach out to other people and say hi and give advice. I guess the lesson I learned is that I don't have to be perfect to help. My life doesn't have to be perfect to help someone else. And I always felt like the people who were offering help to other people and their life is perfect and they have to have it all together, because how can you help somebody if it's not? And I realized it doesn't have to always be all together, and I can still give a wise word or a kind word or something to help someone. And that's kind of a lesson that I've learned the past few years. It's really, really changed me.
Next question is from Kate. It says, how has being a family caregiver impacted your family financially? A lot.
Yeah. We lost a third of our income when I left my job, and we're in a time right now where things are just getting more expensive everywhere. Inflation is pretty rough, and it's not just in our town, in our state, or in our country. It's global. It's been really hard. It's impacted us really significantly, to the point where we've had to fill out forms to get, disability. We've attempted to apply for food stamps, just various resources. We've had to go to food pantries to get help. That's just what it is. I don't feel like we're always going to be in this position. I feel like we are going to rise above this and get through this. It's just right now, things are really hard. Right now, I need to find work that is flexible from home, and that's what I'm trying to do, not just with Caregiver Chronicles, but with other things. And it's kind of embarrassing to admit this. I'm really going to say it. It really is, especially because people don't talk about their finances. It's so taboo. It's so, and it shouldn't be, and it doesn't need to be, because almost every family has struggled at one point in time, and if you haven't, you're so lucky. But it's impacted us pretty significantly, and we're doing our best. We're doing our best to get through it. We're smiling through it. Sometimes we're not smiling. Sometimes we're crying through it. But we're doing whatever we can. We're making do with what we have sometimes. We're just trying.
It also didn't help that when she was sick with COVID, we never got unemployment for her. The unemployment they promised for people that were sick with COVID. We got mine while I was out taking care of her, but we never got hers because they marked hers as fraud, and the state was so overwhelmed they never got it back to us. And then a year later, COVID went through the house again, and I was out of work for 3 weeks again, this time because I was sick. Now, I did have some sick days and some vacation days, so we didn't lose all of the money right there. But
I think your work let you work from home some of those days,
and
too.
And my work did let me work from home, but I still had some unpaid days in there because I was just out. Family caregiving has, and Joey's extensive needs that have required one of us to be home all the time.
Medical bills.
Yeah, it sucks. But, as Sarah said, I agree. We're not always going to be struggling. We're going to catch a break at some point, but,
hopefully it comes sooner rather than later, but yeah. And that's another thing is medical bills and therapy bills. There was a time where we were paying my paycheck worth a week in therapy bills for Joey. Or just about my paycheck worth a week.
And don't get me started on the insurance system in this country.
And yeah, well, we don't really want to get into that. That's another topic for another day. But insurance, sometimes they can be helpful and sometimes they're not. And it's frustrating, and we're not the only family caregivers who are going through this. I know we're not. I know I've talked to other family caregivers who are struggling just as much or even worse. So, I'm glad that you asked this question because it needs to get answered. It needs to not be taboo, and there needs to stop. One thing is there is such a stigma for people who are reaching out for help for disability in food stamps, WIC, going to food pantries, whatever. There's so much stigma, and we need to stop, because we need to look at ourselves and we need to look around us, and we need to know that we're all only one accident, one illness, one injury away from becoming that family that needs these services.
Absolutely. All right, and Kate also asked, will you do an episode on the financial impact of family caregivers? And I'm going to say, if we can find somebody to do, who knows more than we do, talk about it, absolutely.
Yeah, I would love, if you know an expert or anybody who's an expert on that, I would love to have them on. This could also be a topic that I research myself and Jeremy and I discuss together.
The old days.
Well, we've had so many people want to come on our show that we haven't done that, but
that and the fact
in a
that
while.
I work days now, so
yeah, and he works days now.
It's a little easier when I work nights.
That's a topic that I had been actually really dying to cover, and it has been on my list of things that I want to cover. I just haven't found an expert guest, but I would love to do that. I think we should. I think that needs to be on our list for the upcoming season or year or whatever.
I agree. All right, next up from Jess. Have you ever turned a guest away or not published an interview? I can answer the second part of that with no. In every interview that Sarah has done so far that has come up in the schedule has been published, and the others that we have on standby for the rest of August until we can start recording again when the kids are in school will be published. Once the interview is done, it will most likely go up. The only thing I can say where it would be different would be if somebody presents themselves one way to Sarah to get on to the podcast and then, veers off somewhere else and Sarah says, no, we're not putting this up. That would be the only way one doesn't get published.
Yeah.
Now, as for turning a guest away, that's more in Sarah's department.
I have had inquiries of people who have wanted to come on our show that were, blatantly putting out, false information that I knew with my gut to be false medical information.
Essential oils will kill cancer.
That was not the one, but there was somebody coming out who actually, and I'm not going to say exactly what it is, but there was someone who wanted to come on my show with a cure for something that doesn't actually have a cure. And I couldn't. I said I politely said, I'm sorry. I don't think that we're a good match. I don't think that you're a good match for a show. But yeah, that's kind of there. And then there's been other people who they've wanted to come on and they wanted to talk about things, and it's like, okay, but I can't figure out how, mindset coaches. I get a lot of people who are mindset coaches. I'm like, but how can you tie that into caregiving? Or life coaches, how can you tie your life coaching experience into caregiving? And if they can't, I can't have them on my show. It's got to be related to something to do with caregiving in some way, shape, or form, or helping people, or some kind of inclusivity or something like that. I've had I try to be super generous with what type of guests that I have on. I try to have very many different types of guests, many different topics. There's so many areas and branches in the caregiving healthcare tree that we could go down, even family trees, with family things and things like that. But there's just a few things that I couldn't tie into caregiving, self-care, that just couldn't come up for Caregiver Chronicles.
And Jess also asked, have you ever been denied an interview by someone?
I have.
Yeah.
I think it's just once, right? Oh, we've had a couple no-shows.
We've had a couple of no-shows. I think there was one or two that just said, we would love to be on your show at some point, but we're really busy and we haven't been able to get in contact with them since.
There was one person that I really wanted on, and unfortunately, and I'm not going to say their name because they might come on, and unfortunately, I didn't get them, and they just weren't, they said they weren't going to be in the area at the time, or available to record at that time, which was a bummer because I was so excited to have them on and really hopeful, but it didn't work out. So, it is what it is, and that's going to happen. I'm going to say that happens less than people. Yeah, I get no's a lot less than I get yeses. I'm going to say I probably get 10 yeses for every one no, which I know it's kind of the opposite usually, but
all right. And
I'm grateful for that, by the way.
All right, and this one was sent in anonymously. Has working on podcasts together brought you guys closer? I'd say it has, yes. We're literally sitting on top of each other.
It has. It's given us a way to connect on things that we wouldn't normally sit and talk about. I think in our experiences and our thoughts and in views on caregiving, but also it's given us a common goal It's a common goal for us, other than just our children. We didn't really have that before this, I don't think. Like, we had our interests. We didn't really have a lot of common interests before.
Yeah, no.
That sounds awful. Well, we like the same music and stuff, but
Yeah.
Otherwise, and we both like to do like stuff, like go out and whatever and just enjoy life, but I don't know, we just didn't have a common hobby that we both really, really enjoyed together. Like, we liked camping or whatever, but this is something we can do year round that we have.
Sarah asked, what is the hardest part about traveling or going out with neurodivergent children? Other people who don't understand is the hardest part, because they will give you dirty looks, and at first just like you feel awful at first because you're like, am I doing something wrong? At this point, I feel awful for them that they don't understand that the neurodivergent kids need to be out just like the neurotypical kids. They need the exposure, and these people need the exposure. So I've gone from feeling bad about myself from their dirty looks to feeling bad for them.
Yeah, and I would agree with that statement. I think that's part of it, and I also think that Sarah was talking a little bit too about like visiting friends and things like that with neurodivergent kids, and just going anywhere with neurodivergent kids. And it can be, it has its moments where it is difficult, and for me it is the dirty looks and the stares and but there's also the fear of like when you're visiting your kids at a friend's house, or you get your kiddo with you and he's screaming or he's doing something that's wildly inappropriate. There's the, oh my God, is my child going to break my best friend or my friend's blank? Or, is my child going to knock over this stack of books at the library or whatever? So those are just kind of like the hard parts. But for the most part, if someone has a problem with my kids out in public, it's their problem, not ours.
All right, and Jenny at Favor asks, when moving to a new place, what are the best steps to build a solid support network for the caregiver?
I'm going to say I'm a huge advocate now for a support group, which I never was until I joined one. I think everybody should join a support group. Find one, go to your library. I think the park is a hard place for moms of neurodivergent kids to make friends. I really do. I think that normal moms go to the park, but neurodivergent moms, it's a little harder for us. It's not an easy place.
Especially with a child like Joey. Remy can play on his own, so he's a little easier. I mean, he's 11 now, so he doesn't want to do a lot of the same things anymore, and he wants to be on his own even more. But even when he was a kid, he could find things to do. Joey, a lot of times, doesn't even understand. He likes slides, but he might not understand that he's even looking at a slide sometimes.
Yeah, and Remy really had no interest in playing with other kids at the playground and stuff. I took him to the park one day, and all I did was chase Joey around while Remy walked around the park by himself and did Harry Potter spells. And I'm like, we're never going to the park again, because you can do that in your backyard. But I digress because I'm getting off topic. But yeah, I think joining a support group, I think meeting other parents in your kid's special needs class is helpful. If your kiddo is in a special needs class, I think that taking time to look for community groups, things like that, finding families that are closer to yours, I think is the goal. Getting to know your child's teacher and getting to know the principals and, the staff at the school is also very important.
Yes, because they can be some of the biggest advocates for your children, so those would be big support groups.
Yes.
Let's see. And Renee at Favor, how do you develop your child's ability to self-advocate?
That's a tricky one for us because we have one kiddo who's nonverbal, but, we encourage signs, and I encourage him to use the iPad pretty much all day when he's tugging on me to get a snack. I'm like, nope, use this. And while that's not full-on advocacy, it is, I want, I need. So in that sense, it's just modeling. For my other kiddo, it's teaching him that it is a-okay to say how you feel and what you need, but make sure you're doing it respectfully. Don't just start screaming.
Yeah, we've had some different episodes of that where Remy has been able to explain why he needs a break from certain things, and he's been open and been able to talk about his diagnosis and the feelings he's been having where he's been overwhelmed. And then there's been times where he's just been so overwhelmed that he hasn't been able to communicate it, and it's led to misunderstandings that have gotten him in trouble.
And meltdowns and outbursts. So I think just being open, communicating with your child, I think modeling advocacy for them. I think, again, it sounds ridiculous, but yeah, I think, saying, I've been having panic attacks lately, and I'm with Remy, and he saw me have one the other day, and I looked at him and I said, Mom, he's having a panic attack. And I said, but do you see what I'm doing right now? I'm not screaming, I'm not flipping out, I'm not throwing things. I'm just trying to focus on my breath and talk myself down. And I think teaching him that is so important to, model I know what it feels like to be the erupting volcano, because I can be one too. But it's not appropriate to explode. You have to figure out how to internally and externally get yourself to a reasonable level, and then you can advocate.
All right, and Renee also asks, how do you practice self-care as individual parents and a couple?
I think self-care for me is a priority. It really has become a major priority, but I think being so burnt out and so overwhelmed and so depressed with my caregiving roles, I had to. And this past year, I think my self-care game has stepped up 1,000,000%. Right?
Oh, yeah.
Self-care as parents, I think, is super interesting.
Yeah.
Because I think having time with your family and doing things and taking them places, that is self-care. We went to Mystic Seaport a month ago.
Yeah.
And that was self-care for us, I think, as parents, because just taking those little day trips with our kids and trying to enjoy them, I think, is super important. And self-care as a couple, I don't know. I don't even know who you are.
Self-care as a couple comes when, most of the time, when her parents are able to take the kids for a night. And then we're able to just be a couple. We might go to dinner. We might go hang out with another friends or whatever. And then sometimes even self-care as a couple comes when, when the kids go to bed and we're able to have a friend or two over and we can just play games and sit around and talk and drink beer. And a lot of times that is our self-care.
Or even just last night would be an example where I was getting insane cabin fever and I just needed to talk to an adult. And I just sat there and talked to you about my crazy idea for a sci-fi movie. And you just looked at me like I was nuts and laughed. And, that's just conversation, communication, I think, is so important. And I think that's just trying to enjoy life, I think, is all those self-care things.
And we also received a comment saying Sarah has a very uplifting and welcoming personality.
Thank you. That's really nice to hear.
All right, and then here's another question we received. How do you make sure life is inclusive for Joey and Remy in the community, school, at home, and with family outside the home?
So here's the thing. I can't really make sure life is inclusive, the world is inclusive for my kids. But I have that attitude, again, of, if someone has a problem with my kid being here, it's their problem, not ours. And I know that that's a little bit selfish, but I also am I'm not going to take my kid to the Capitol Grill. You know what I mean?
That's a fancy restaurant in Providence for the people who
There's
don't know.
Capitol Grills in other parts of the country, too. It's a fancy restaurant, There's one in Hartford.
Yeah, there is one in Hartford.
I think there's one in Boston, too.
Okay, but you just named 3 New England cities, so
okay.
People listening elsewhere might not know.
To people, it's a very, very, very fancy... It's one of the fanciest restaurants you can go to. I'm not going to take my kid there because I know he's not going to... That's not an environment for him. Applebee's, sure, why not? Everybody can go to Applebee's. But you get what I'm saying. I'm not going to take my kid somewhere where it's not going to be an appropriate thing for him. I'm making sure that when we do things that we're trying to do things that are appropriate for them. But also with the mindset of, if we're in a place where my kid can be and should be and somebody doesn't like it, too bad on them. And I think that's just how you make sure life is inclusive. I think by getting them out there in the world to experience it as much as possible is the biggest thing. And I think I don't know. That's just how I do it.
Yeah. At home is easy. Everyone is inclusive to everyone in the home because, we have to live together. That's kind of thing.
Pretty much, we have no choice but to accept each other as we are, because that's what you have to do when you're a good family.
And with family outside the home, most of our other family, our extended family on both sides, are very understanding. They are very accepting. They do anything they can to make it easier on Joey or Remy, depending on the situation. A lot of times Joey requires more supportive needs, but, they're very accommodating because they recognize what's going on and they will do anything they can to help him.
Yes, I would agree with that.
All right, next up, what has the journey been like with your family outside the home, your parents, in-laws, siblings, in regards to acceptance of the boys? Well, we just kind of answered that. They're all very accepting on both sides of our family. They understand that Joey's needs are very extensive, as I said. They understand that sometimes Remy just needs to be alone to calm down sometimes. The only ones I would say that have a hard time understanding right now would be, we have a nephew who's younger than Joey, and sometimes he doesn't understand why Joey doesn't want to be around him. And it's not that Joey doesn't love his cousin. It's honestly his cousin yells a lot, and
yeah, it's just little. Yeah, that's like little kids stuff. I'm gonna say, as far as family outside the home, accepting the kiddos, like siblings, in-laws, my sister was one of the first people. Granted, I had already had the doctor's appointment booked. My sister was one of the first people to recognize delays with Joey and to say, hey, you should probably take him to the doctor and something's up. She didn't know I had the appointment booked already because I had that suspicion as well. She was one of the first people, but my sister has a background in early education. She's a special education teacher with early elementary background. So she has that background, which has been good for me in that sense because she has a pretty decent understanding of special education and needs in early childhood development. My parents, there was a little bit of denial, and I think there might have even been a little bit of denial with your parents at first too, but there was a little bit of denial with my parents, and, some other family members. There was a little bit of like well, how do you know? And he's so smart, and he can't be autistic because he can do blank. And thank God my sister advocated with me and taught me how to kind of start the conversation of, well, just because you can do that doesn't mean you're not neurodivergent, or doesn't mean you're not on the autism spectrum. There's different things. And at the time, I knew really nothing about autism when my kid was being diagnosed. I had to learn everything. And I would just be up all night going through in like article after article after article till my head spun. And there were some things that I read that I was like, this is crazy. And there were other things that I read where I was like, this is crazy, but in the other way. And what works for us and what doesn't. And there was so much information that a lot of it wasn't true and some of it was. And it just, and there was so much more that I needed to learn throughout the years. And I have been learning. And, my dad was one of the people in the beginning who really it wasn't so much that he didn't believe us or wasn't accepting. It was that he was kind of in denial. It was just hard for him in the beginning. And, we got to a point with my dad where now he's educating his buddies on autism and what life's going to be like for Joey and what to expect. And it is what it is. And, he's been one of my biggest go-to people for support with my kids and has just been a great advocate and a great helper because my dad's learned so much. So, in the beginning, there were tough moments, but everybody has come around and has supported us and our kids.
It also helps that Joey loves your dad.
He was named after him. Yeah. And
Grandpa's his favorite. He runs up to him.
Joey loves everybody.
Joey does love everybody, but he runs to your dad more than anybody else.
He does. And it's just, there's just, even your family, like when we were a couple years ago when we were visiting and Joey had his meltdown in the restaurant, not a single person, and Jeremy's family is huge. There was 13 of us there, and Joey had an episode, and we're in a restaurant, and not a single one of them said anything, or at least not in front of us. It was a, hey guys, we understand. You know, they were trying to help us figure out what was up. We went outside, there was still a meltdown. We ended up having to leave, but then Joey calmed down enough so we could go back and join the family for festivities later. And it was all good, and not a single one of them said anything wrong. We got our food to go, we left. We met up later. There was a little bit of a what happens if he does it at the anniversary party, but we had kind of come up with a plan. So, you know, there's been a lot of acceptance, and I'm grateful for it.
All right. Now, Lisa from Favor asks, how do you create space for your marriage? Help from in-laws.
This is the space right now.
Also true, yes. That we do this a lot. A lot of times, with the hours I'm now working, we can actually spend a little bit of time together once the kids go to bed. And so we've been doing that. We really like the show Only Murders in the Building on Hulu, and we spend time watching that one together. That's kind of some time together. But yeah, that's the thing. We make a little time to just spend time together. She may be playing The Sims and I'm reading something on my phone, but we're doing it together.
Well, we're in the same room. Yeah, we're not really together because we're not really connecting, but we do have those moments. And I have my days where I say to him, like, hey, listen, like, just sit down and hang out with me. Like, let's not put anything on. Let's just sit down and hang out. And that's, you know, that's important. And that's our time to connect.
And there are days where the kids have been so much, she's like, I need to go to the room by myself. And I'm like, that will save our marriage. So
I need everybody to leave me alone.
All right. Lisa also asks, how has having two kids on the spectrum stressed your relationship with each other? Oh, wow. It's incredibly stressful because they could be both having meltdowns for two entirely different reasons at the same time and feeding off of each other. And we have to divide and conquer. And the truth is, it's very difficult to get either one of them to calm down in those moments. And so that puts a strain on it. And then when we're done, we're either incredibly exhausted or, you know, we're on edge at that point, and the slightest thing can make us end up, you know,
snapping at each other. Absolutely. And I think, you know, every marriage has stress. Like, there's no way around it. No marriage is perfect. No relationship is perfect. It just is. But there's also this other stress of, like, Jeremy and I have very different upbringings. I think we've talked about that a little bit on the podcast. You were raised by Southern Baptists, and I was raised by hippies. So I think that says enough about how different our backgrounds are, and our upbringings are. Also, take into consideration that I have attention deficit disorder. Jeremy, we don't think he's neurodivergent. You know, he doesn't have, like, a diagnosis of a neurodivergence. So he has to put up with, like, my ADHD, and both of our kids have ADHD and autism. And there's just all of these. He has to have a lot of patience with me and with them. And we have to both be accepting sometimes of each other's differences and boundaries. There has to be boundaries. And, you know, there are times where, like, he might be agitated with one of the kids, or one of the kids is, usually it's Remy, and Joey doesn't, but, like, there might be a time where, like, Remy's talking back and he's, like, yelling back at him, and I'm like, instead of that, just tell him to stay in his room and ignore him. Like, just let him scream it out, you know, or, because what's the point? And I get it too, because he's also, it's just, and it's not, I don't want to say it's bad parenting, because it's not. It's just the way he was raised. He was raised, the parent gets the last say, where I was raised in a little bit more of a lax environment. There was some strictness there, but, you know, it was just, there were times where, like, if I needed to just go in my room and scream, where my parents were like, well, you know what, whatever. But there's differences like that and things like that. And that is a little bit of a stress. And there's times where, like, he handles things differently than I would have, and I get PO'd about it. And I'll say, well, now blankety blank blank blank, and this one's doing that, and that one's doing this, and what the blank blank blank, and, you know, so it's like all of a sudden, like, there's yelling about, I don't like the way you're handling this, you're making everything worse, and you're making everything worse, this, you know, and now this one's flipping out, and I'll tell him, like, you know, you deal with Joey, and I'll deal with Remy, or the other way around, depending on whichever parent needs to be where at the time. There's times where I got to tell him, just ignore it, back off, breathe. And there's times where he's got to tell me, hey, it's not that bad, calm down, it's okay, I'll handle it. It just depends on the day and our views of the situation and what is a big deal and what isn't a big deal. And I think that's, and I know we're not the only parents who go through that. And I'm sure that there are neurotypical families that have the same arguments. So that's kind of one of the things, I think.
And then Lisa had one more question. Says, in what ways has your journey made your marriage stronger?
We have to depend on each other. Like, we have to have a partnership. We both know, and we both want to see our family be as successful as possible, whatever that might look like. And our success for our family might look different than success for other families. And that's okay with us. And I think that knowing that and knowing that him and I are better together, we balance each other out. A lot of my strengths are things that are his weaknesses, and the other way around. A lot of my weaknesses are his strengths. And so we're kind of like a yin and a yang, I guess. Actually, this is a funny question because it was our anniversary yesterday, and I posted about us being yin and yang.
Yeah, right. We've noticed that, one strength is the other's weakness, like you said. And we've learned to rely on each other, to depend on each other, which is something you have to do in any marriage. But it's been more pertinent to our marriage than we ever thought possible with the needs that our children require, and how we will always fight for what's best for them. So we're teammates, we are partners.
We're yin and yang. Cheech and Chong.
Okay.
I don't know. Bert and Ernie.
Okay. Oh, man.
Superman and Superman's twin brother. What was his name?
Superman did not have a twin brother.
Oh, Superman and Spider-Man. No, they didn't work together.
Not even the same comic book companies.
Dark Vader and...
He's a villain. He's a bad guy.
And Yoda!
Well, you named one character from Star Wars and a combined character from Star Wars and Spaceballs because his name is Darth Vader, not Dark Vader. We should watch Spaceballs and review it and bring back. I watched it with my wife to review it.
Oh my god, I don't know. I would say peanut butter and jelly, but you're allergic to peanut butter.
Well, I was gonna say like Batman and Robin, but okay.
Okay, that works.
Okay. While this is going off the rails, hold on. Lisa also says, I'm beyond proud of how you've taken your pain and developed your experiences to help others. It has been a pleasure watching and listening to you grow and stretch outside your comfort zone. Our communities are lucky to have you and your family in it.
Thank you. From the bottom of my heart, thank you, Lisa. And for those of you, Lisa is, she's my support group leader, and she's also the reason we got the Favor sponsorship. She came on to talk about Favor and wrote an article about Caregiver Chronicles, and that's how, that sponsorship came about. So she is such a huge and important part of the show behind the scenes that she doesn't really get credit, but she deserves a lot of credit for what she's done for us, because we owe her so much gratitude, and everybody at Favor. A lot of our questions are from staff at Favor, and we're very grateful for you guys and your questions and your support of the show and our partnership with you guys.
Absolutely. And then we also asked, what's next for Caregiver Chronicles? 100 more episodes.
Really? Yeah, probably. I would love to be doing this 2 more years from now. I think that would be so cool.
We do have some interviews lined up already to start recording in September.
I do have a couple interviews lined up in September. I have some collaborations that I'd really like to do. There's a lot of people there. I have people who have been reaching out to me this summer who I'm like, hey, listen, I'll talk to you in September. I don't want to start booking things till I know the kids' school schedules and things like that just yet. I think that there's going to be a lot more to come with Caregiver Chronicles. We're nowhere near the end of our journey. I think we're still in the beginning.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm hopeful that we get more sponsorships. I'm hopeful that we get more partnerships. I'm hopeful to see our name on more lists. And, I'm hopeful to be more active in the caregiving community in our town, in our state, in the country, and across the world.
And then final question, what happened to your other podcasts? Of course, if you are a newer listener, we hosted we hosted 2 other podcasts, and Remy, our son, hosted one that I did with him. They were called I Watched It With My Wife, where we reviewed movies and TV series and docu-series and documentaries. There was I Listened With My Wife, where we reviewed music, and Racing with Remy, where Remy talked about all the big racing of the weekend, and I did that, and a lot of that was on YouTube. So, but what happened to those podcasts? Well, we got overwhelmed trying to do 4 podcasts that much, and also COVID came through the house. Mono and COVID, and then on top a dinosaur.
They just got eaten by a dinosaur.
Yeah.
I'm kidding.
Yes, mono and COVID, and then I had a mystery illness that kept me out of work for 2 weeks, again, mixed with long COVID.
COVID related.
And a seizure, and so we've had health problems galore between the 4 of us. And Sarah had a thing where she had elevated white blood cell
count, yeah.
So, I mean, we've had our share of health scares the past year, that trying to do too much just wasn't worth it in the time frame.
Well, I think burnout.
And yeah, burnout, a big part of it.
Burnout.
But so we reevaluated and decided that 1, this is the most helpful. The others are more entertainment based. We wanted to make sure this continued. And 2, we can always go back and revisit those. I know Remy has expressed an interest in renewing Racing with Remy. But we've got to work through some things with him first, because he got overwhelmed in his new school, moving up from elementary school to intermediate school this year. So he had a really rough time. And so we've just had so much going on where we needed to focus on the family, that 4 podcasts was too much. So we cut it down to 1. We do still watch movies. We can easily review things. We do listen to music. We can easily pop those up. But we're not going to be releasing weekly or monthly ones for a while on that front. Although Sarah has suggested that I host a Disney podcast.
I have suggested that because Jeremy is very passionate about his Disney battles. And we really do love podcasting. And I love this, and I don't know. It's something that I've really loved to do. I know I have opportunities to be on other podcasts and other speaking engagements coming up, which I'm really excited about, in addition to Caregiver Chronicles, just as a guest and things like that. But that's okay. That's exciting for me. We have talked about starting a podcast where we talk about like disability news and or caregiver news or things like that. We're not really sure how we would fit that in with Caregiver Chronicles, because right now Caregiver Chronicles is our main focus. It's the most, like, of all the content that we have put out, Caregiver Chronicles was the first one we started. It is the most important one. It has the most value content. It's also our most recognized one. There's a huge difference between listeners with Caregiver Chronicles and the other ones, and I'm glad for that. Because this is, if it were the other way around, I think I would be sad. I think I would feel defeated and want to give up. Because what we're doing here is so important. Like, we're trying to help others and bring advocacy and bring awareness of different things and different struggles and help relieve isolation and whatever kind of caregiver stress and burnout we can. So I really, Caregiver Chronicles isn't going anywhere. It's staying. As far as our other podcast goes, we're expanding on Caregiver Chronicles with like another podcast. These are all things that we've talked about. I don't know right now. We've had a lot of things we had to sort out, and we'll have to see where we are, in a few months when school starts back up, and see how things are going, and things are better this year, then there probably will be more content on other platforms and other things from us. But we did just start putting Caregiver Chronicles back up on YouTube. Like, we finally got to that point, which is huge for us.
Yes. So this episode will be on YouTube on Sunday.
Yes.
The same day you're going to be listening to it on the audio things.
Yes. So we just started, like, putting some of our older episodes up on YouTube and things like that. And, you know, we want to continue Caregiver Chronicles first and foremost, and then our other projects, they're side projects, they're fun. I don't know where we're going to go with all that just yet. I'm not sure. But this is our main focus. The other thing, I know I have gotten a lot of comments about Racing with Remy and a lot of questions about Racing with Remy. And the reason Remy really isn't putting the effort into it like he should be. Like, we asked him to do the episode prep. You know, obviously not all of it, but some of it. You know, take notes, and he doesn't want to put the work in right now. He's an 11-year-old boy. He wants to play. So, you know, it kind of phased out for him. And if he wants to start doing it again, I think Jeremy will be more than happy to start recording with him again. And I'll be happy to do what I can to support them. So.
Absolutely. I enjoy doing it with him. I would love to do it again, but he has to put in the work because I can't sit here and watch, you know, highlights from all of these racing series to talk about them, especially for a show called Racing with Remy. He's the star. I'm just there to help guide him along because he is a 11-year-old boy who needs some guidance on certain things.
Yeah, he's an 11-year-old boy. You don't want him on YouTube by himself.
Yeah, but he loves racing. I think he wants to pay more attention to it in general, but I don't think that he understands everything that he has to do. And I think, so, you know, for him, a lot of it is, I watch the highlights on YouTube, I get the big things, and then we go record. And I'm like, there's a lot more to it. And, you know, as he gets older, I want to train him on that because, you know.
Editing and video. Yes. Yeah, well, he can get a job from it.
Yeah. But this has been our 100th episode. Can you believe it?
Not really. I'm really kind of, not to mention all like the kind comments and everything like that. It just meant a lot to me because I was sitting here today working on the computer, working on stuff with the YouTube channel and trying to do graphics with it, and just sitting here calling myself an idiot because I don't know what I'm doing. Like, you know, how can I be doing this? What am I thinking? Who do I think I am? That kind of feeling was kind of my mode today. And then, you know, to think back, 100 episodes of the show, 2 years, tons of incredible guests that I've had the pleasure and what's the word I'm looking for? Privilege, yes, to interview, and just people, like, just connecting with people and helping people and getting to know other caregivers in the caregiver community who are out there and helping caregivers and caregiver influencers, which I didn't even know was the thing. And I'm so glad it is because it's great. You know, it's great to have these people to look up to and to learn from who have been down that road. And I'm just so proud to be somebody that is considered one of them. And I can't believe that I am sometimes, and I'm grateful for 2 years of Caregiver Chronicles, for 100 episodes, for our sponsors, for the Whole Care Network, for our guests, our listeners, and, you know, this wouldn't exist without Jeremy, so I'm grateful for you too.
I'm grateful for everyone you just mentioned, and I'm grateful for you as well.
Thank you. And that'll wrap up this week's episode of Caregiver Chronicles, and we'll see you next week.
Bye.